Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. Hope you all had a great, fantastic weekend. But to start off this week, Xbox got another major supporter for the Activision Blizzard deal. It seems like they've amassed a nice little support system for this buyout, though by this point, you have to kind of wonder, does it even matter? So far, these regulators haven't exactly taken the bite, as you will. So we're going to get into that today, as well as a few Nintendo topics. A pretty significant leak is going around that you might want to be a little cautious of, and then also that much awaited Pokemon update is inbound with actually some at least vague details. So we do got a lot to get into today, and I mean with that, let's just go and get right into things, starting off with Atomic Heart. You all did vote this as your second most anticipated game of the month, only behind Hogwarts Legacy, which turned out to be pretty good. But yes, Atomic Heart will be out tomorrow, including a day one Xbox Game Pass release. Now, this game has always looked insane from a visual standpoint. That much is very clear. Though now that it's finally here, how does it actually play? Is its gameplay as good as its art design? And well, it seems like that kind of depends on the person. Reviews are starting to roll out now, and it seems to be quite divisive. Currently has a 74 overall score on Metacritic with 26 total reviews as of this recording. Now, some critics do seem to really enjoy the game, saying that it's a great alternate history shooter that takes inspiration from games like BioShock. I've heard it compared to games like Wolfenstein. It's drawn comparisons to Prey, Half-Life, or even games like Portal. That is something that I kind of noticed about this game, though. It does seem like the gameplay is somewhat varied. There's stealth-based elements, there's puzzles, melee combat, gunplay, and of course it also has some RPG elements as well. And the thing is that most of this actually seems well executed. I mean, I've heard some complaints about the melee combat itself, but other than that, it seems like it's a consistently fun and entertaining game. Unfortunately, though, some of the consistent downsides that I've read about was that it has a messy story and the dialogue isn't exactly great. All things considered, though, based on what I've seen and things that I've read, even though it's not necessarily a perfect game, I think Atomic Heart will have some fans that genuinely love it for both its world and also its gameplay. Again, it will be out tomorrow on February 21st for Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and yes, it's also coming to Xbox Game Pass day one. You gotta love it. Now, we also got an update for Hogwarts Legacy in the future it may or may not bring. So far, this game has been a resounding hit, to say the least. It's been topping the charts on Steam, PlayStation, and Xbox, all while breaking a record on Twitch. And then just to top everything off, it's also been well received critically. So, with all this success mounting, it seems inevitable that there will be more wizarding fun in the nearish future. Well, actually, that might not necessarily be the case at all, as the Hogwarts Legacy director revealed this to IGN. We've been really heads down bringing Hogwarts Legacy to life, so at the moment, there are no current plans for DLC. Now, in retrospect, that does kind of make sense. I know a lot of games anymore always have a DLC map planned and everything, but I think when you look at this game in specific, you can see that they've had their hands full. Not only did they delay it from its initial 2022 release, but they've also still yet to launch it on the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, and then also the Nintendo Switch. I mean, there's some serious questions on how exactly Hogwarts Legacy will perform on said devices. So, yeah, I'd say that they're pretty busy and everything, but even then, with all things considered, I don't think that this is the last that we're going to hear about this topic. It might be a while, but with the amount of success Hogwarts Legacy has had thus far, I do imagine a future where we either get a significant expansion or just a flat-out sequel. I do believe the Harry Potter universe has a bright future in the game industry going forward. Now, actually, speaking of updates, the much-anticipated Pokemon Scarlet and Violet update is inbound. I think for any Pokemon fan, we've all been waiting for a performance fix, and we're hoping, and that's the key word here, we're hoping that this update, which is slated for the end of February, will address some of its technical problems. Well, Nintendo has now released some of its patch notes, and yes, I did say some. Oddly enough, they didn't reveal everything. Now, there might actually be a reason for that. We'll come back to that here in just a second. But what they did reveal is that there will be some feature adjustments and also some bug fixes. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description below if you want to go ahead and read over every individual update. But for the most part, these bug fixes seem fairly typical, except maybe one which notes that they're going to reduce Pokemon and NPCs in certain areas of the game, which in return will address an issue that caused the game to forcibly close in certain situations. Now, theoretically, that might improve performance in certain areas, but that's kind of the thing here. Not one time did they specifically mention performance fixes in the patch notes that they currently released. Now, fans don't particularly seem pleased about this, and I mean, I don't blame them, but at the same time, just hang on before we all freak out. Right at the bottom, tucked away, they also noted this: "We are planning further features and bug fixes not listed in these patch notes. Please check back here for full details when the update data is distributed." So it actually sounds like they didn't include the full list of patch notes here, and you might be wondering why. And well, that's because the upcoming patch might align with a very important day, being Pokemon Day. That is on February 27th, and they usually have their own showcase where they reveal all things Pokemon related. So I wouldn't be super surprised if they went into more detail during some type of showcase and then just kind of drop the patch the exact same day. Now, hopefully that will include performance fixes, but considering their vague wording here, I believe there's a good chance that they'll talk about it either way sometime here soon. Now, whether that will be a part of this patch or a future update, well, I guess we'll see about all that. Now, as for the Microsoft Activision Blizzard situation, we are starting to near the end of this case. It is getting closer. I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but we are getting closer. We should start to see a lot more key movement in the coming weeks where we can maybe, just maybe, get a grasp as to what will ultimately happen. And a part of that is a hearing that's happening tomorrow on February 21st with the European Commission. This is being described as Microsoft's last-ditch effort to persuade the EU to approve this buyout. Top executives from Microsoft, from Activision Blizzard, Sony, Google, Nvidia, EA, and even Valve are all set to be there. So, I mean, this could be the make it or break it week for this acquisition. Interestingly enough, though, right before this big hearing takes place, yet another major union has publicly pledged their support of this acquisition and are now asking regulators to consider pushing the deal through. This is coming from UNI, which is a global union that represents more than 20 million workers across 150 countries. And they specifically asked the EU to consider what they're saying before they make their decision. They went on to say, "We know that the Commission is focusing on the effect the deal will have on consumers, but it cannot ignore the role this deal would have in making the video game labor market fairer for workers. This is an industry where workers are crushed by excessive hours and low pay while facing sexual harassment and discrimination. It is an industry that needs an expansion of worker protections, and Microsoft's commitment to labor rights will help make that happen." Now, this is actually the third major union that's publicly supporting the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. See, the thing is that the game industry doesn't exactly have a great reputation, as UNI alluded to here. The work culture is more or less known as toxic, to say the least, and, well, it's really been that way for as long as I can remember. Growing up, actually, my friends and family would often ask me if I wanted to work in the game industry. And I always told them no, because all of the horror stories that I've always heard. I mean, this is me as a teenager, and that's really just looking from the outside in. But I think especially with some of the things that's come to light in recent years regarding Activision Blizzard in specific, yeah, I'd say it's been eye-opening for a lot of people. There needs to be some changes here, and that's been one of Microsoft's focal points when it comes to this acquisition. They've vowed to fix the internal issues within Activision Blizzard if the buyout goes through, and a part of that plan is for them to allow worker unions. So these unions, they look at that and they are salivating over the opportunity to get their foot not only into Activision, but also just into the game industry as a whole. This ultimately could be a big change for the entire game industry when all said and done. So UNI, they're asking these regulators to consider work conditions while making their decision. They want to be a part of that consideration. The thing about all of this, though, is this is not the first union to make a similar statement. And in fact, the CWA, they just sent a letter to the European Commission as well. So now Microsoft has two of the biggest unions in the world working together, both urging these regulators to approve the buyout just before this hearing takes place. If anything at all, Microsoft has good allies here. And with this hearing looming, they're going to need all the allies that they can get. Valve being there, they'll likely be an ally as well. But this is just yet another example of Microsoft showing these regulators we're trying to make things better, not worse. We're going to put Call of Duty on more platforms, not less. We're going to give consumers more options, not less. And we're also going to improve the work environments as well. So they're trying to hit all major points of dispute, and the more public this is, the more pressure Microsoft can put on regulators. Of course, they still got to prove that what Sony has been saying is wrong. Sony, of course, is going to be at this hearing, and we've heard what they've said before. Microsoft's going to have to try to prove that they are being disingenuous. I think that has become pretty evident as time has gone on. But nonetheless, we'll see what happens with all this. As I said before, we should see some key movement relatively soon. And then after that, whether it goes through or not, we can just kind of put this whole thing in the rearview mirror. I mean, it has been a crazy, crazy wild ride, but hopefully I've been able to help get you all through this as the ensuing craziness just continues ever forward. Now, we also got a pretty significant leak for Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Now, don't worry, I'm not going into spoiler territory or anything like that. I actually just want to cover this as more of a warning or hype, depending if you want to look at it or not. I'll kind of leave that up to each individual. Basically, what's happening here, though, is that an official Tears of the Kingdom art book leaked out online. I believe it's like 200 plus pages or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But with this being an official art book, a lot of things were discovered that we previously didn't know about. I mean, you have characters, enemies, locations, armor, outfits, etc., and they're all being posted online now. Now, if you're interested in seeing any of those ahead of release, I'll go ahead and drop a link in the description below. Again, I'm going to leave this up to each individual. However, I'm personally not going to cover it myself. One, Nintendo, they don't exactly take too kindly to leaks, but more so there's also spoilers here, even if they're on maybe the more minor side of things. At the same time, though, I don't really blame fans going out there to try to find these pictures, because they're curious, because Nintendo they've been weird about this release. I mean, on one side, it's one of their biggest releases for this entire generation, which, I mean, that's saying a lot considering how much success they've had with Switch games, but for whatever reason, Nintendo has been awfully secretive about Tears of the Kingdom. There's still a lot of questions about this specific game, and I mean, we're only 3 months away by this point. Now, hopefully we'll get a Zelda Direct sometime here soon, and that should fix the problem. But either way, for the time being, if you're trying to avoid spoilers, be careful online. If you see a Zelda topic on Twitter or something, you might want to just go ahead and keep on scrolling. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, how do you feel about game preservation with modern physical media and how they're distributed? As you can see here, this was actually pretty evenly distributed, with 27% of you all saying good, forever physical. Then 30% of you said you're indifferent, they're useful but incomplete. And then 30% of you said bad, because large updates and accessing servers ruins it. So yeah, I mean, it looks like opinions are still very split on this. If anything, I'd say the results are a sign that a lot of people still do like physical, but at the same time, with how modern games work, it does raise the question on how well can they actually be preserved. Is it much better than digital? In 50 years, are we going to be able to put a disc or cart into our console and have a good experience? And I'm going to say that kind of depends on the game. Now, I do collect physical games myself, but I'm going to go ahead and vote for indifferent as well. Now, the reason for that is because it really does just all kind of depend on the game. Some games are complete upon launch, especially for re-releases. Take something like Persona 5 Royal. It's a mostly complete game with its re-release. But then there's also situations like Cyberpunk 2077, where, as we all know, I mean, it was a vastly different game at launch compared to what it is now, thanks to its many, many updates. You might even be able to say the same with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when all is said and done. Then there's also other situations where a disc basically acts as a key to unlock a game download. Halo Infinite, as an example, is not actually fully on the disc. So I think it all just kind of depends on the game itself. But even still, there are a lot of games out there that do run off a disc with relatively good content. I just hope that remains intact for the most part going forward. Gaming is trending towards that more digital side now, but much like the movie industry, I just hope the game industry continues to give fans options. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you like the video, don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.